Well, let me introduce you guys this evening real fast, and we'll get started now that we're at 7:06. But I just want to thank y'all all for being here tonight on the Big Texas Read. And we had a great conversation 2 weeks ago between Kathleen Kent and Joe Lansdale, and tonight we're joined by Harry Hunsicker. And so I want to tell you a little bit about Harry Hunsicker. He is the former executive vice president of the Mystery Writers of America and the best-selling author of 8 crime thrillers. He serves as executive producer for the film adaptation of his novel, The Devil's Country, which is currently in development. And his work has been shortlisted for the Shamus and Thriller Awards. Harry's story, West of Nowhere, was selected for Best American Mystery Stories. And his latest novel, Texas Sicario, was published in January of 2019. So we're real excited to have Harry here tonight in conversation with Joe Lansdale, who is the internationally best-selling author of over 50 novels, including The Bottoms, A Fine Dark Line, and Leather Maiden, and the popular long-running Hap and Leonard series, which I've read, and I'm just now starting the series on Netflix. I didn't realize it was there. But many of Harry's cult classics have been adapted for television and film, most famously Bubba Hotep, starring Bruce Campbell and Ossie Davis. And Lansdale has written numerous screenplays and teleplays, which have gotten him those plane rides out to Los Angeles, including the iconic Batman, the animated series. And he's won 10 Stoker Awards, which is amazing. And tonight, Harry and Joe are going to be in conversation about Edge of Dark Water, among other things. But Edge of Dark Water has been described as Mark Twain meets classic Stephen King. And the Boston Globe said it was a cast of unforgettable characters, a terrific read. From its pages waft memories of Huckleberry Finn, To Kill a Mockingbird, and even As I Lay Dying, with its journey to lay a soul to rest. So thank you both for being here tonight. I'm excited about the discussion. And if y'all, if the audience have questions while they're talking, just put them in the chat, and we will be sure to get to them toward the end of the conversation. But gentlemen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Blake. It's always fun to do stuff with the writing workshop. It's always fun to talk to you, Joe. One of my first panels ever when I first started was with you and Bill Kreider at Con Mysterio in Austin. That was many, many years ago. And I know you and Bill were close. I am a huge fan of your work, as we've talked about before, and I'm enjoying Edge of Dark Water. I haven't finished it, but I've read a portion of it. And as I've been reading, my mind keeps going to one of your earlier novels from about 20 years ago that I read back in the day. And that's The Bottoms, which is another Depression-era Gothic set along the Sabine River. And Bill Paxton was making that into a movie, as I recall, before he passed away.
He was.
I also got a little hint of, I don't know how many people have read this, Cold Sassy Tree, like a darker version of Cold Sassy Tree by Olive Ann Burns. So give us a little, just a brief summary of what the book's about. And then I'd like for you to talk about the Edge of Dark Water and its relationship to The Bottoms, because they seem there's a relation between those two. It's been a long time since I read The Bottoms, but it seemed like there's a relation between those two other than just the setting and the era. They're kind of like spiritual sequels almost. So tell us about the book and their relationship, if you will.
Well, you know, the book in many ways was influenced by all of the things that you mentioned, by the way, but also by the Odyssey and Jason and the Argonauts. And then when you read it with that in mind, you start to see that kind of stuff popping out in it, you know, and mythology in general. But what it is that it's a female narrator and her friends discovered the body of one of their other friends who wanted to be a movie star, a beautiful girl who they find tied to a Singer sewing machine in the Sabine River. And the idea is that they want to burn her body up and take it to Hollywood. And unfortunately, they don't have a way to go to Hollywood, but they decide to go down the Sabine River, and as if the Sabine is going to lead to Hollywood. But they're trying to get to a place where they can catch a bus and take her ashes there. And in that process, there's also who killed her, because that's when they're trying to figure out who killed her. There's also, I don't want to tell too much, but there's also some money involved that they discover. And there are some people that want that money, and there are people who want them, and not in a good way. And there's a villainous character called Skunk, who is my mythological creature, and maybe not directly out of the Odyssey or Jason and the Argonauts, but I think somewhat of a certainly a mythological feeling, like a demon. It can be from almost anything, but yet a sort of human demon. And I guess that kind of lays the framework. And then as far as like the connection between the bottoms, I think that probably in your life you develop certain subjects that interest you and certain kinds of characters that interest you, and that they kind of surface again from time to time. They may be, somewhat different. They may be incredibly different, but there's a variable there where they connect. And I think that may be true of a lot of writers' work, certainly like Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor and, writers of that ilk. And you may not know that you're even doing it, or that you can get away from it, or maybe you don't want to get away from it. But I believe that thematically, and the writers that I love the most seem to have certain thematic aspects to their work and a tonality to their work, though it can vary. I like to think I vary, but most of the time, if you read a page or two of mine, it's me. And that's fine. And to me, these themes are things that I guess haunt me, or things I think about. Some of them are actually connected to my own life. Some of them are connected to stories I've heard from others. And then the rest of it is just damn lies, like we writers do.
Exactly. So I was struck when I'm reading this, you are a master craftsman. You have such a evocative sense of the characters and the descriptions and the turn of phrase, but especially in Dark Water, you're writing this from the point of view of a 16-year-old girl in the Depression, right? That's the main character. And I'm blown away by how you did that. I mean, the mastery to do that, I thought was amazing. But tell us about the challenge of putting yourself in the head of a 16-year-old girl in the Depression. How did that work?
I never really thought about it. I don't mean to be a jerk about it, but it just never occurred to me to think about it. That character started talking to me, and I just started writing. I'm not much of a planner, and I'm not a plotter. I don't make notes outside of remember somebody's eyes are blue, or remember Jack had a hat, so when he took it off in the living room, because like 3 chapters later, I may discover that I've lost somebody's hat. But for me, I have to feel that character more than anything. And I do believe that we all, I don't care if we're male, female, white, black, brown, we all share humanity. And we all share certain things in life that we want. Now, people can judge whether I achieved that 16-year-old girl or not. And you know what? Everybody's welcome to their opinion. But I felt like that character was real to me. And when I wrote that book, I was a 16-year-old girl. So maybe that says something about me that I don't know, But my mother was certainly a 16-year-old girl once, and she told me a lot of stories. And she told me a lot about growing up in the Great Depression, because my parents were older when I was born. My dad was 40s, my mom was late 30s, and I was born in 51. So I guess they had reached their greatest maturity during the Great Depression. That's when they were hammering out their lives. And my grandmother, I think I've said this before, when she died in the 80s, she was nearly 100 years old. And she had been born in the 1880s, had seen Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. So I grew up with all of these women that had stories, and of course, my wife and I have a daughter, Casey. And so, you learn things, some that you don't want to learn when you're raising daughters, and you learn things from your sons too. But when it's the opposite sex, you're going, oh, that's curious. I never saw it that way. And so I think these strong women that I was fortunate enough to be around, always had stories. And I think most of us that writers, I think it's definitely true, are natural observers. I never said I'm going to do that. I'm going to watch this and make it into a story. It's just that you absorb differently than a lot of people. At least some writers, most writers do, maybe not all. I can't speak for everyone. But for me, when I start writing, I discover I know things I didn't know, or at least I believe I do. And so I have my own personal mythology that goes into my characters, along with all of these influences that you mentioned, and that the ones that that I discuss. So I don't know that it was hard as whether it was right or not. Other people can make that decision, but it felt right to me.
It felt right to me too. People ask me sometimes, I relate to that. People ask me sometimes, what's your research like? I mean, do you research a book? And I go, my life's research. Every day is research. It soaks in. I'm glad to see I'm not the only person like that. So you touched on writing. You don't outline. What's the creative, briefly, or as long as you want to talk about, what's the creative process like for Joe Lansdale? I mean, are you a morning writer, everyday writer?
Right. I almost hate to say this because my friend, poor Kathleen, has probably heard me talk about this so many different times. So I know she's heard that story. But, you know, I write daily. You know, it doesn't mean that there hasn't been a day where I had to miss or something, like maybe a doctor's appointment or take the dog to the vet or, you know, something like that. But generally, I get up real early. Like this morning, I had some things I had to do late morning, so I got up at 5:30. And, you know, I write for about 3 hours. That's it for me. If I write more than that, I've often said, and I believe it's true, I get diminishing returns. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't break that rule, and have broken that rule on occasion, but boy, is that rare. For me, I get up, I have a plan to do 3 to 5 pages so I can be a hero every day. And then some days I'll do 10 or 15, but it's still within those 3 hours. You know, it's funny, I don't know why that is. It's like I got 3 hours and I'm going to get 3 pages or I'm going to get 20. You know, and it's going to be within those 3 hours. Because when it comes to me, it's like somebody just turned on the faucet. And there are some days when, you know, I work harder for it. But for me, most of the time, I think of myself as being a storyteller more than a plotter, if that makes any sense. And when I was growing up, my family, they were storytellers, especially my father, who could not read or write. And so that storytelling sense is there. And of course, you know, I heard my uncles and my grandmother and people that they knew, you know, family and extended family and I guess the mothers and fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers of friends of mine. And when all the kids would go play, I would sit and be quiet and listen to their stories because they fascinated me more than the kids. And I was one of them, you know, but to me, it's more of just a natural feeling. The story gets there. And when I wake up in the morning, it's there. And it gives me a piece of it every day. Have I ever had novels and short stories where I had to scratch more? I have. But does it happen often? Thank goodness, no. So for me, it's like this gift because I can create my own movie and my own book and my own play and my own comic in my head. And I can sit down and start writing. And it's the most joyful part of my day because if it goes well, excuse me, let me cut my phone off, I forgot. Because if it goes well, the rest of my day goes well. And so it's very important to me to do that. And I do it 7 days a week, 99.9% of the time. And that's how you get it done. And I don't do multiple drafts. I do one draft that I constantly polish as I go. And then I do a sort of overall polish, you know. So that's the best I can, I guess, put it in a nutshell.
That's the process. Were you a reader as a child, or were you just listening to the story?
I'm still a reader. I was a insane reader. Yeah, absolutely. Comic books got me into this, and comic books taught me to read. And I would read anything. I would read aspirin bottles and cereal boxes, whatever I had that had words on it. I kind of absorbed it. You know, it's like, you know, a chicken pecking corn. I was like a guy pecking words, and I was always just devouring words. And I still, you know, a little less in the last couple of weeks, but I generally read 3 or 4 books a week because I read steady too. And I do other things. You know, life, you got more time than you think and a whole lot less time than you realize. It's that kind of thing. You can waste all your time wondering about when you're going to do it. And so you just got to do it. Quit making excuses is my advice to writers. And if you don't want to do it, fine, shut up, go do something else. I don't want to hear it.
I'm trying to stay off social media because I can relate to that. There's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah, I get on Twitter, and when I'm on there, it may seem like I'm on there a lot, but I'm only like 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And most of the time when I put it together at the end of the day, I've been on 20 minutes, 30 minutes at the most, if I'm on that much. And, you know, you got, and sometimes you get into these arguments for politics, or you get in, and some of that's refreshing and makes, you know, I need to be angry sometimes because anger is also one of the fuels that I put into what I do. And if I don't give a damn about things, then my work doesn't read like it gives a damn. Or it's just like, you know, what's, this guy going to do next? He's going to go through all of the standard things. Well, you can write a standard novel, but the character needs to have something special about them, or the prose itself. And, you know, you got to go for more than that. And you may fail. I failed. A friend of mine, Philip Jose Farmer, who's no longer with us anymore, is a science fiction writer who I truly loved. He told me once, he said, sometimes you got to go out on the limb and saw it off with you sitting on the wrong end. And he certainly did that many times. And you know, he had a number of failures, but God, when he was brilliant, he was brilliant. And I sort of thought, I don't give a damn if I'm a bestseller. That's not what I'm trying to do. I do want people to like the work, to buy it, but I don't, and I've said it before many times, I write like everybody I know is dead, because I'm not writing for you. I don't care what you want, what you like. I don't care about the audience. When I get through, then I think, oh God, I hope the audience likes it, but not when I'm creating. Because then I begin to filter expectations in that I think other people have. You know, my agent like this, or my editor like this, and you know, sometimes they don't, and sometimes they might be right. But when I'm writing, I can't have those considerations, because I'm not looking to please my fans when I write. I'm not looking to please buddies. I don't have reading buddies and things like that. And if you have them and you need them, I'm nothing against that. I'm talking about what I do. But then when I'm finished, I certainly hope that there's an audience for it. And my belief is that if I like it, there's got to be somebody out there like me. And so far, there's enough of them like me, or like what I do, at least in some of those novels, that my audience has been quite consistent, and it's been quite effective for me.
Has that changed over time, your idea that you're only doing it for yourself? Because I admire that. I think that is where the truth comes from in storytelling.
Yeah.
Has that changed for you?
Yeah, the first 4 or 5 years when I started back in the 70s, I started selling in 73. I was writing nonfiction.
Whoops.
But by the time I got to 80s, I really realized I'm not having any fun, because I got into this because I love to write. Not because I'm trying to please somebody, not because I'm trying to be part of this group, not because I'm trying to have other people think, oh my God, we're all in this club together. But I had to, I think, do that to kind of understand that. You know, I did all these different kinds of things and chasing the market, and nothing wrong with chasing the market a little bit, as long as the market doesn't own you. You know, I go to the butcher shop, I don't have to buy. I can get what I want. So I'm kind of like that. When I go to my market, I pick out what I want to do. And if somebody says I need a crime story or whatever, and I think, oh, that would be fun, but then I try to approach it from the way that I would like to see that crime story. Sometimes it might be more traditional even, but sometimes it may be a lot more, less traditional and different. So once I realized that it was about me, not you or not anyone else when I'm writing, my whole career changed, my whole life changed. It took a little while because they thought, my God, this is weird. What are you doing? And it's hard for people to realize that in the early 80s, people were going, well, Joe, that's not how these stories are done. That's not how they end. These characters they have, this characterization is getting in the way of the pace of the story or what have you. And sometimes I wrote stories that were all about pace or that were absurdist, so I didn't really have this sort of concrete view. What I was trying to do is this voice interesting? Are there characters in this that I want to read? Or if I'm not doing a big character piece, can I make the story or book the character? Because sometimes, like Vonnegut's a good example, I don't think he writes good characters at all, nor tries. But what his books are the character. If you read Breakfast of Champions, I don't come away from that thinking, oh my God, what a great plot. And even his social criticism, I have to admit, I don't find it nearly as penetrating as some others do. But I do find when I read him, not only is he easy to read, he's unique to read. So it's an experience that's different to me than reading the next in a series of bestseller books where there are certain things that are going to be there every time because they're those same characters. But I always try to bring some of my own excitement to it. And even though these are things I do, I want you to understand that sometimes I fail. And that's the other thing. You can't fear failure. You just can't care about that. Because when it all gets to the end, you know, you better have had a good time, because, you know, I don't want to just look over there my hundreds of editions of books and say, well, that's all my life was. I want it to have been fun, not just to have sold books. And I want, you know, I got my family, I got other things that interest me, but those are the things that go into the books, is real life as well as what you read and what you learn. But I don't want the stink of the library on everything I write, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. I'm going to write and put it over my computer, your quote that "Write like everybody you know is dead." I think that's my takeaway for the night. So far, we're not done yet. So let's get back to Edge of Dark Water. Could that book have been set somewhere else? Do you think? Could those characters?
Not for me.
Not for you? Okay.
Not for me, it couldn't.
So did that character come to you at the same time as the setting, or was the setting always there for you? It
all came to me in the same moment.
Okay.
You know, most of the time it feels like a lightning strike, but there's always something that initiates it. And what I learned a long time ago is to not use the conscious mind as much as the subconscious. The conscious can then sort through the subconscious elements and make them a little bit more feasible, or put them in some sort of form. But, and sometimes I don't even care to do that. Sometimes I like going out on a limb and being fantastic, or just being strange. But most of the time I let the subconscious lead me. So there could be things that have been inside my subconscious for 20, 30 years. There are a couple of books I wrote, I know that the seeds for them have existed for 30 years or more, but I didn't know what that seed was. I just knew it was there. And I just let it, you know, lie fallow until, you know, there was some kind of fertilization, and those things begin to grow. And it's just like I got up, I go, hey, I got it. There's a novel in there, but I don't know what it is. I know that I have a feel for it. For me, it's more of an emotion. I don't know. I know that's kind of odd, but for me, I don't really think I know this character, or I know this. I know that I know this emotion. I think it's probably closer to music, in the sense that it's feeling that rhythm, it's feeling that beat, it's feeling that bass, and it's all in there. And I don't know how it goes, but all of a sudden when I put my fingers on the keys, the notes start to play. Now, I may get up one morning and that all plays out for me, but so far, 47 years later, I'm still doing it.
God bless you. Thank you. 47 years of that. Your comment about letting it percolate reminded me, I saw a video of a YouTube video of Stephen King a couple days ago, and somebody asked him if he kept a file of story ideas, and he said, no, because that's just a great way to keep track of all your bad ideas. And He said what to do, which is exactly what you said, was it's just inside you and it festers and it percolates in your brain and then it comes out. So there's no need for a file. So, or a writer's notebook kind of thing. I think it's what he was talking about.
I could add something else to that if it's okay.
Yeah, please, please.
I think there are a lot of ideas that I come up with that I know are good ideas. And sometimes I think that's a bestseller idea, but it's not for me. It's not the book I want to write, or not the book I would be good at writing, or not the book I'm truly enthused with writing. I've come up with ideas and I go, I wish I had done that. But then I realized, no, I don't, because I couldn't have done it. Because even though it's a good idea, it's not for me. I've actually had ideas I've given to other people and they've written stories with them, you know. But in general, that's also a very important thing to know, is to recognize if that's your story or somebody else's story, or if you're going back to what I was saying before, trying to write that for somebody else or trying to please somebody else. You know, when you get through with something, the editor may make some really good suggestions and maybe make you realize where you missed the boat, make you realize how you can patch the boat. But a lot of times editors just tell you stuff they want to do, and it's not necessarily stuff you want to do. And if it isn't, don't do it.
So tell us what it was like for you to see. I think you're probably best known for Hap and Leonard. I think that's probably a safe bet.
Fair enough.
But tell us what it was like for you, the creator, to see them on TV on the small screen for the first time. What did that feel like? And how did you feel about their portrayal?
I saw him on the set for the first time, which was really weird. And I spent most of the entire first season on the set. I was there just about every day. I moved to Baton Rouge, which they substituted for East Texas, and which really pretty close. It's just a line in the dirt. You step over it and you're it's the same place. But I got to know the people doing it, and the director was a friend of mine, and the screenwriter or the script writer who did most of the scripts for the first season was a friend of mine. And so, and then James Purefoy and I became friends, and I got to know Michael K. Williams, and I got to know Bill Sage on it. So I had a different experience, you know. And my son came on the set one day, and James came around the side of the house, and he was, you know, dressed as Hap. And my son went, "Oh my God." He said, "You know what, Daddy?" I said, "What?" He said, "I thought that was you when I was a kid. So they look so much like you, and he's walking like you." And what it is the actors watch you, whether they even know that they're doing it. The same thing we're talking about sorbing. And James was fighting that British accent, trying to get that East Texas accent, you know? And so what happened is it was this weird feeling of these people inhabiting you, and in some ways inhabiting you 30 years earlier. And it was a strange feeling, but it was also magnificent to hear your dialogue spoken, because a lot of it that they used was mine, and they did some of their own. But still, for me, it's always different. You know, I don't write for it to be made into a movie, though I love cashing those checks. And I want it to be a good movie. I want it to be a good series. And if they ask me my opinions, they know damn well that they shouldn't have asked, or they're going to get it. And but I always say, when I was a co-executive producer on the show, and I always say that I got to say anything I wanted, but then they got to do anything they want. And so you have to understand that a lot of times movies could be much closer to books than they'll tell you. They'll tell you they're two separate things, and they are, but sometimes they aren't as different as you expect. But there are also some books that just are almost impossible to film, or very hard to film. And so I have to kind of be able to see them as an alternate universe, Hap and Leonard. You know, they don't look like Hap and Leonard in my head. I haven't changed my view to where I think of them when I think of Hap and Leonard. And, you know, they have certain mannerisms that are similar, that they copied from the scripts and from me. They borrowed things from my memoirs that I've written little snippets of for different things, and put them into the characters in the show that weren't in the books, but were in part of my life. And that was kind of creepy and sometimes emotional to see, you know. And so it was a thrilling experience. And I was very pleased that, and Purefoy and I talked about this, we got 3 seasons, and people said there were only 3 seasons. And James and I both were saying, man, we're lucky we got 3 seasons that were that good, because they really were good. And we got such good actors for every season. And it was just, it was a magnificent experience overall, you know. So I'm going to complain, because I'm that kind of guy. I'm going to complain when you're doing stuff that's mine. But I also realized that once I signed that check, sign, you know, the check and cash it, or even sign the contract, I've made a deal. So they can, you know, they have the right to just say, shut up. But also, when I try to get as much into it as I can, like executive producer and stuff like that, so at least I have the right I told you about before to complain and them to go ahead and do what they want. But it makes me feel better, you know.
So how about Cold in July? Did you like how that turned out, the movie version?
Yeah, I was on the set for most of that too, and got to spend a lot of time with the actors, and it was the same director, you know, and same script writer for that matter.
Really?
And
okay.
So it was, yeah, Nick D'Amici also has a part in the film, and he wrote the screenplay. So that was kind of cool, you know. But I got to spend time with Michael C. Hall and, you know, Don Johnson and Sam Shepard. And it was, you know, it was a trip. My wife was there. My daughter came in for a while. My son came in for a while. And, you know, the director said that the Lansdales travel in packs. And he's right. You know, we're pretty, and my niece, for example, my niece Pam was my, I guess, you know, she kind of served as kind of a secretary for me in some ways, though far more important in like handling all of the book deals, all the interview stuff, all the things. She would come to me and go, okay, you got this interview today at 4. You got this at this time. And when did you eat last? Put that down. You can't have that. You know, she actually kind of mean to me when you get right down to it. But I really loved having my family there, you know, because we're a very close family and we're all part of this. I mean, the kids are both in the business, at least on one edge of the other. And, you know, my brother does some writing. And so it's, you know, it's important to me to have the family and let them enjoy the same things I'm enjoying, maybe in a different way. But, you know, I'm glad that they were able to do that on both the film set of Cold in July as well as the TV set. And the Bubba Hotep, I think Keith went out and stayed with me while they were filming that one. You know, that's how Bruce and I became friends, Bruce Campbell.
So speaking of the family, tell us what lockdown life has been like for the Lansdales. We're all suffering through the same thing.
In some ways, I've said it before, but it's not that. I miss my martial arts classes that I teach. You know, I just teach private classes now, but I still miss them. But most of it is like what I always do. You know, I'm home, I have my reading, I have my movies, I have my weights, I have all the things I'm interested in doing. But it is different, and I think I said this before. It's like being in the novel I Am Legend, and all the vampires are outside the house going, Neville, come out. Only this time it's not vampires, it's a virus, you know. And I keep going, well, maybe it won't be so bad just to get the virus and die. You know, because it's out there all the time. Let the vampires have me. And then you have to go, no, board the windows, board the doors, you know. And so I do get out once in a while to, you know, I mask up and I go shopping to make sure that nobody starves. But it's just me and my wife here and the pit bull. And our kids have, of course, you know, they're grown, they have their own careers and lives. But in some ways it's no different. But I just think this whole miserable disease and this whole miserable political situation just kind of weighs on you like a, you know, like a cloud with weight in it. It's just more than you would expect because it's just constant, you know. And there are times when that really, I just go, man, well, that's when you want to open the door and let the vampires have you.
It's a terrible year. So I have one more question, and then we're going to do some.
Well, you know, wait a minute though. We do have the asteroid coming in November, so it's not over yet.
We got that for us. It's been a happy year.
For us.
I think they're prepping us for space aliens because they're talking about them in the New York Times. That's just my personal theory. So, what books, TV shows, what book or TV show or movie have you seen in the last year? Any of those all those categories? What that have blown you away? What's been your favorite read or things to watch in the past year?
Well, if on TV, I would say The Marvelous Miss Maisel. You know, I think that's one of the most brilliant TV series I've ever seen. I think everybody's fantastic. The ability to keep me interested in all these different characters and all these different changes in these characters for 3 seasons. And when I saw those 3 seasons, it was like, I felt like, oh my God, you know, this is over. And usually when you get to the 3rd season, it's something you go, oh no, this is the same old. So, you know, I watched that, and book-wise, you know what I've been reading, I've read so much, I would keep you forever, but what I've been reading lately is actually Joseph Payne Brennan, who I read when I was a kid, who wrote horror stories, and he also wrote a sort of supernatural investigator, and Lucius Leffing, I think is what his name is. I'll have to actually look at the book to be sure, but I've been reading all of his work, and which is several volumes that I have, you know. And I've been reading a lot of DC comic archive collections from the Silver Age. And I've enjoyed the hell out of that. You know, it's mostly out of nostalgia, which for some reason this time makes you feel nostalgic for the older times. Although a lot of nostalgia is a lie. You know, it's not really what you think it was. But there are certain aspects of it and certain memories of it and certain things that were real in that time that I think as you get older, you miss. As long as you don't get, you know, blinders on and start seeing all those times as better. Damn sure wasn't if you were black or women or gay, or, I mean, the list would go on. And, but there was a sort of simplicity to it. And I think that we're bombarded so heavily with, you know, the news and with ads and the whole thing. And when you read the 1950s science fiction novels by writers like Philip K. Dick and writers of that nature, Frederick Pohl, Cyril Kornbluth, they told us this was coming. You know, there's a book called The Space Merchants by Fred Pohl and Cyril Kornbluth, and it's all about what we're doing now with all of this multimedia and all of these things bombarding us all the time. And what was it, Alvin Toffler that wrote Future Shock?
Future Shock, yeah, right.
Yeah. And this is it. And it's also dystopia right now. We're not going to get into dystopia. We done in it, baby. Yeah. This is dystopia. And we have a chance to get out of it if we take it, I hope, because this is only going to get worse, because we're living in a Philip K. Dick novel. The only thing missing is a flying car, and somebody's building one of those. So there you go. Have
you seen Social Dilemma on Netflix yet?
No.
It's about social media and how addictive it is. It's worth speaking to your dystopia and the constant barrage of stuff. It's worth you're seeing. So we're
all going to have some aspect of that, because that's part of technology and that's part of the new life. And so you can't divorce yourself from it, because if you do, then you're a Luddite, and then you totally don't know what's going on. And I carry my phone around in my pocket because my business is in my pocket. Yeah. My agents and all that, whoever, I've got it right there, and I look it up. I may need to see a manuscript on there. If not so much now because I'm home, but if I was traveling, I was taking my office with me. But on the other hand, even like Facebook and Twitter, like I was telling you, I may hit it 3 or 4 times a day, or even more than that, but I may not be on there more than 30 seconds or a minute at a time. And then I put it back in my pocket. And then, and I'll be honest with you, I have a fan page on Facebook, but if I didn't think that was helping me with books, which it seems to get people aware, I would drop both of them.
Really?
And I don't sit and watch 24-hour news either. It has to be something that's absolutely, a hurricane's coming to my house, how close is it? I kind of touched base with it in the morning and with the afternoon. And then there are exceptions, you have certain political things going on, or certain disasters that are so humongous at that time that you can't tune it out, or don't want to at least find out what's going on. But the rest of the time, I leave that stuff alone, and I try to pick movies and TV series that I want to see, and I try to read the books I want to read, and I try to live the life that I dreamed of living when I was a child and was fortunate enough to do. All I ever wanted to be was a full-time writer and a martial artist, and I've done them both all my life. So no complaints.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So Blake, do you want to just throw it open?
Yes. We've got some great questions that came in while y'all were talking. I think it'd be great if Kimberly, if you want to unmute yourself, we'll start off with your question for Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Kimberly.
I really love your dark sensibilities, but I really believe that you are a very positive and optimistic person. But do you revel in the dark places that you create in your stories? And I ask this because sometimes I have a hard time giving into my darkest thoughts when I'm writing.
That's a good question. I revel in it a bit, but often my darkest stuff has humor in it. So I think that helps. I wrote a couple of things in my life that were really, really dark, and I loved writing them. But when I got through, I actually literally felt exhausted. I wasn't depressed, but I was certainly, not exactly cheerful either. But I think that the thing that helps me have and I don't think of myself as an optimist, really. I'm more of a positive person. I think optimism is sort of a blind acceptance that everything's going to be cool. No, it ain't. And I don't want to think of myself as a pessimist, like everything's terrible. No, it's not. But I think of myself as having a positive force that drives me. And I think the reason I write so much dark stuff is that it gives me a release from any kind of darkness and worries that might become excessive. Because, a lot of times when people meet me, they're always surprised, you're not what I expected. Well, you're not what I expected either. In fact, I don't know you, and you don't know me. So you don't know. It's like people always reading somebody's work and saying this represents them. I think that that's reasonably true, but it's not absolutely true. I've written about some terrible, terrible characters, and I've written about horrible racists and sexists and things like that I couldn't stand in a room for 5 minutes, but to explore that is also a way you explore yourself. Because I don't care how bad a character is, there's some element of that in you. That doesn't mean that you're that person, but we all can't write about those things unless we are able to face the human condition or our own failings in humanity, even if we haven't, fortunately, crossed that line into that dark side. But I also do it as humor. Sometimes to me, some of the darkest things are just funny as hell. And Robert Bloch, once told me, he said, he wrote Psycho. And I love Bob. I didn't know him real well, but I knew him enough that we'd call each other and talk and, exchange notes. And he wrote a piece. Well, he had a piece adapted in a comic book anthology I edited, and, this and that. But the thing is he said humor and horror are just flip sides of the same coin. And they are, because as Twain once said, there's no humor in heaven, which what he means is that everything that's funny is generally about somebody's misery or death or something horrible happening to them. Somebody falls off a ladder in a movie, you go, oh my God, Laurel and Hardy, that's so funny. But in real life, that would be horrible. But on the other hand, you might later go, that was kind of funny because he didn't die. So there's that kind of thing that horror and humor are there, even though we don't always admit it. And I think that was a big revelation for me when I read that quote from Twain, many good grief, so many years ago, I don't even know when I read it. But like Twain, I'm as he always said, if you want to meet the interesting people, you need to go to hell or someplace like that, because the people in heaven, I don't want to play a harp. I'm not interested in these guys. And being atheist, that's not a real concern of mine anyway. But I find that you have to be someone that is willing to look into the darkness, if that's what you want to do. That doesn't mean you have to do it. But if you're trying to write dark stuff, you have to understand the darkness in yourself, and it helps relieve it, actually. It's sort of like popping a blister, because we all have it. Everybody go, I'm not like that. Somewhere you are, somewhere in there you are. It's a matter of whether you want to fish in that fishing hole or not. That's up to you. And to me, I find that it's a relief. And I have such a sardonic, sort of satirical way of looking at things. A lot of times what I'm writing, I think satire, or I think it's humor or whatever. And most people catch that. Some don't. But again, I can't write for them. I got to write for me. So remember, you don't have to be dark and evil to write dark and evil and to plumb it. But it's sort of like letting the sewage out when it gets stopped up too. And but it's going to get stopped up again. That's the way it works. Because we're putting a lot of crap into us every day. Observation, life. And and the thing is, I love life. I feel like I am one of the luckiest people that was ever born, because I get up every morning and I'm happy, I'm excited. I try to be a decent human being. You can't always achieve it, but I try. And all of those, are part of who you are and part of what you can put into your work, I believe. But it's also part of what makes life worth living. I don't know if that helped you or not.
It does. It did.
I love that. Great question. Thank you, Kimberly. Betty, you had a couple questions in the chat. Would you like to ask your questions?
Hi, Ben.
You're on mute.
You're
Oops,
muted.
I think you might still be on mute, Betty.
Mute.
Can you hear me now?
There you are. There you are. Hi, yes.
I
How are
am
you?
a reading teacher. I am a reading specialist. So reading is my joy. And I try to convey that to my students. I have been in charge of a book club at my church where we chose books and read at least 8 books every year. We read over 113 years, and I have retired because I'm tired. And I just wanted to rest and read what I wanted to read. But in teaching reading and teaching writing, components of literature I taught my children are setting, characters, problem, solution ending. And most books, you can take those elements and can survey that book by just taking each element. And that's what we had fun doing, was discussing elements of the book, and everyone gave their own opinion, free to give their own opinion. No one was to really get into arguments of that opinion, because your opinion is your opinion. And we honor that. So I was interested in you taking those components of this book and going over it. Also, symbolism is a lot of fun to me. Sometimes the author may not have chosen something to be symbolic, but maybe we as a reader, we have chosen it
most
to be
of
symbolic.
the time, most of the time I don't think writers do that. You know, one of the things in this,
the thing in your book, the sewing machine.
That's what I was going to say. Kathleen mentioned that last time. That one was kind of purposeful, but a lot of the others, you know, aren't. And in fact, I'm sometimes surprised when someone will point something out to me. But that one, and I think also the fact that my mother, when I grew up, she had that Singer sewing machine. She'd pedal it and had the bobbin and all this stuff to get, you know, to make clothes and things of that nature. So I probably had that in the back of my brain. And then also the fact that this is about not fulfilling a role just because you're expected to fill what is considered, at least at that point in time, a feminine role. And this is about people who reject roles as to what they're supposed to be. All the characters in some ways reject roles, but like I said, I didn't really think about the setting. It was just there. So I guess my subconscious was thinking about it, but I don't really think about character or setting or any of that when I write. It's there, or I couldn't write it. You know, it somehow develops. I've never thought about a 3-act structure in my life except when I wrote a play. And for me, I'm sure it's in there, and sometimes I don't think it is. Some people have pointed out I got 2 acts. You know, I build up and then it's over with, you know, and some things I have 3 acts. But for me, if you're telling a story that you're interested in, and that the characters are interesting, and that they don't do what you expect, and they're not like chess pieces that you're moving around, but they're like living human beings to you when you're creating them, then you keep from doing those expected things. And a lot of times the trail offs in story interest me so much more than what I think of as the sort of clockwork mechanics of a story. I can appreciate that. I've done a little of that because I like to experiment and find out what I can fail at or what I can succeed at. But for me, most of the time, it's a natural story. And if they go off on trails, I don't care, as long as those trails are interesting and it kind of circle back to the main line. Or sometimes it'll go off on that line and you realize that what you thought was the main line wasn't main at all. So I think I'm very instinctive because I never had a writing lesson. I never had writing teachers. You know, I had high school and I had college, and I majored in anthropology, archaeology. And because I didn't feel that what little I had heard from these people helped me much. I've taught at university. What I do is kind of like, you know, kick them back into play, because they'll either got it or they don't. All you can do is encourage them. And then after that, it's willpower. And you can't give people willpower. Talent matters, but I think willpower matters more. I think that's probably my case. I don't know that I'm that talented, but I do have a strong will. That's my wife.
Great question. Thanks, Betty. Bethany, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Joe, great book. I jumped on that raft and just went right on down with everybody. So it's really thrilling and fun, and got into it. You said really early on in the conversation tonight how Sue Ellen sort of came to you and was talking to you early in the process.
Well,
How does that, did she sort of just then lead you into the story, or do you jump in and try to manipulate it? How does that work? I love just
no. Well, I'm sure you do manipulate it subconsciously, or your subconscious is thinking about it. But in a conscious sense, no. I mean, I don't think anything is like a gift from heaven or anything like that. Your subconscious is creating this stuff and putting it together. but I've learned to not be aware of it, because if I'm aware of it, then it gets messy. So for me is that when I wrote that, I didn't know that girl was in the water till they pulled her up. I didn't know why she was in the water. I didn't know what was going on with Sue Ellen's family. I didn't know who her friends were. I didn't know they were going to go down the river. I didn't know that they were going to take the ashes as if to go to Hollywood, but everything just started clicking as I wrote it. And I feel like my best books are pretty much like that. Some, you know, I've had a few that like I said, were more clockwork. And sometimes that's because I want to experiment just to see if I can do it, because I'm not worried about whether it's successful or not. I don't have to worry about that, you know. But I won't say don't have to worry about that, but I try not to worry about that, as I said before. I try to do whatever it is I'm interested in. So for me, it was just, yeah, this character just showed up and she said, you know, let me tell you a story you don't know.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank
you. Kathleen, you had a question for Joe. 2 weeks late, I should add.
Turn it off again.
Hey, Joe, you know, you often talk about how Greek mythology informs your work. I was just curious, do you remember the first Greek myth that you heard? Was it the Odyssey? Was it Hercules? Do you remember that first Greek legend you heard about?
You know, when I was a kid, I used to watch these sword and sandal movies that they put on TV, you know, and some of them were before the sword and sandal rage. But they were somewhat like that. And I just became interested. And then I went and got Edith Hamilton's book, which was on mythology. And I used to sleep with the Iliad under my pillow because when I was young, Alexander the Great was somebody I was fascinated with, and he supposedly did that. And so I thought, oh, you know, so I would get it out and I read it backwards and forwards. And I like the Odyssey too. I love them both, but really the Iliad's my favorite. And I think it's because all of the conflict with the gods and all of the manipulations going on and the heroes, especially when you're, you know, 11, which is probably when I read that. And when I read, it's one reason I'm an atheist is because when I read that and I read the Bible, I realized, mythology, I get it. And so when I read those, when I discovered Edgar Rice Burroughs about that time too, I realized this is a modern mythology. This, if, you know, somebody put this aside and left it for years later, you know, you could say, well, this was what happened in the past, and these were our heroes and our gods and our, you know, what have you. So to me, mythology, probably the first thing I think was probably the Iliad. And maybe Edith Hamilton, some of the stories in there. I always liked the one where about Persephone and you know, going down to Hades and all that. That was, for some reason, that just fascinated me. And references to the river Styx, I find pop up in my work far too uncomfortably. So yeah, I've always loved mythology. And I think that when you write well, that's what you're doing. You're creating a mythology. Hap and Leonard are mythological characters. You know, they're bigger than life, and yet they're somehow real. And that's how Hercules was. He became a demigod, but he was powerful, more powerful than people, but he had the same human faults. You know, he made mistakes. He did horrible things, and he did wonderful and glorious things. And so for me, my best work is mythology. And I think Edge of Dark Water is a myth. I try to make it real in one sense, but in another way, it's bigger than life. And you try to do that in such a way that people don't realize you're making it bigger than life. You know, it's like humor is not funny if the people in the book know it's funny. I mean, they might crack a joke between each other, but when bad things happen to them, you know, we might laugh. I wrote a book called Jane Goes North, and it's nothing but a road trip with these poor women just having, and they just take it in stride. But that's part of the humor. That's part of the myth. That's part of the bigger than life, because real people wouldn't take it in stride that way. But so to me, that's important, is to create a myth in most of my work. And so that when people read it, they believe it as they read it, but when they get through it, leaves some sort of echo in the head, which is what I think mythology does.
Right. Very
No
good.
way.
Thanks.
I answer everything.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good question.
Joe, I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
I think Harry mentioned earlier tonight that he read a quote by Stephen King that if you have a file folder, that's just a folder where you can keep all of your bad ideas. And I got to see a screening of Hansi Oppenheimer's documentary about you called All Hail the Popcorn King, which I really loved. And there's a story that you tell in the documentary about how your wife would make this popcorn for you that was just soaked in Kroger grease or Kroger lard.
Yeah.
And
Lard.
on those, oh, was it lard?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, so I loved this Kroger lard. But you would have a fitful night of sleep whenever you had that popcorn, but you would wake up with a story idea. And I'm wondering,
Full blossom.
yeah, so you would write a story, and I'm wondering, you said you're kind of off of the Kroger lard now, and I'm just wondering.
I'm not 20-something anymore.
So do you still have those kind of lightning bolt moments in the middle of the night?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. A lot of times when I'm working on a novel, that's all that's there. But then I may have like somewhere like my subconscious goes, hey man, I'm taking a break. I'm going to go over here and we're going to work on this. And sometimes I'll start stories. I have no idea what they're about, but I'll just write whatever it is I'm thinking, then I'll forget it. I found some completed stories that I didn't even remember writing until I found them. I thought, oh, I got up in the middle of the night and wrote that. That's not on my schedule. So I just dismissed it, you know. And sometimes in the morning before I start, I'll just go, oh, what I'm thinking about. And I'll just start playing with stuff. And I've written some of my best stories that way. And I've taken pauses in the novel to take my morning to write short stories, you know, from time to time. And I also sometimes, you know, will use that morning to maybe look at galleys for a novel that's coming out or something of that nature. So it can vary. But a lot of times those stories, a lot of the ones I used to sell to Twilight Zone magazine, a lot of others, they were just like a bolt of lightning. The first story I sold to Twilight Zone magazine, I wrote in 20 minutes. It was called The Dump. And it's been filmed. It was on Netflix in Love, Death, and Robots. And I wrote it in about 20 minutes. I didn't have and that's when I was doing it on a typewriter, and I didn't have a carbon copy of it. And I just put it in the envelope, said, screw it, I'm sending it. And I folded it up in my usual, not very, you know, good way, because they always let me know, Joe, you start in the middle and you fold it. But anyway, I put it in the envelope and I sent it to them. And I started thinking about it, and I thought, oh my God, that story is terrible. I just came up with this idea, and it's absurdist. And he liked it so much, T.E.D. Klein, he called me on the phone and said, man, I'm buying this. This is great. And it was only a few pages long. It was called The Dump. And it was, I think, the very first thing it was the very first thing I had in Twilight Zone. It's been reprinted forever, and it's was made into that little short film on Love, Death, and Robots, as was another story of mine called Fish Night. But it's just an absurdist story. There's no real characterization. There's just pure storytelling that draws you in, and it's quirky and it's twisty. You know, it's not like a major piece of work, but it's just one of those stories that came from popcorn. There it is. Bam. Yeah. And after that, oh man, I got to eat more of that greasy stuff. And well, I could tell when the bank account was getting low, because I could hear my wife and taking that popcorn pan. I thought, uh-oh, bank account must be getting low.
Oh, I love that. That's great. That's great. It was a great documentary. I can't wait to see whenever it's released again. Well, hey, everybody, are there any other questions for Joe? While you're thinking, I'm going to paste some links to Joe's books at Interrobang Books, and also Harry Hunsicker's books at Interrobang. You can see all of their books there, which I think, yeah, you can just go crazy on Interrobang and they'll ship them to you. But if there's no other questions coming in over the chat, I really want to thank you all for another great evening of questions. Joe, thank you so much for being part of the Big Texas Read. Harry, thank you for your great questions. And it just was a treat to get to hear all about your work, Joe, over these last 2 weeks. So thank you all for being here, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Blake.
I thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wow. Everyone left like that.
They're like, we're out of here.
That's the fastest exit I've ever seen.